Spring is in the air in Colorado. Of course, we have snow, and then the next day it'll be 60. The ever changing times, especially we see this with our children. So, this week, let's talk about when we get stuck on one way of being. I remember when my daughter was young, I used to would say, she never wears skirts. And then the next day she would come in and say, Mama, I want to wear a skirt. Or I would say, she always does this. And then the next day she wouldn't do that. Or she always eats only this. And then the next day it would change. So remember, that is the one thing that you can count on with your children. Now, you can get fixated and you can start to see them through one lens and one-sided. And yet, I'm going to encourage you this week to really open up your vision and to recognize the changes that are happening with your children. They may be just like minuscule, very small changes, and yet change is always happening. When we get fixated in one way or another, we can't move forward. We actually get stuck. So when we can only see one side, and let's say see only the negative side, or only what they're not doing, or always what they're doing, or always what they are doing. I have so many parents that come to me and my kid is always angry, or my kid is always acting out, or my kid never helps out in the house. My kid never is kind to others, whatever. It becomes this very all or nothing or black and white thinking. And that's actually not what's happening. We can get fixated on that in our minds and we can only see one side. But this week, if you are fixated in my kid is always this way, or you hear yourself saying, my kid never does this, find out where they do. If your kid never helps out, actually open your vision and start to notice where they do help. I noticed that with my daughter because she never helped with the chores or with the recycling or anything. But I started noticing with her friends, she was extremely helpful. It was just bizarre. It wasn't that she wasn't helpful. It was that she wasn't helpful in our dynamic because I was pushing her or pulling her or trying to get her to do something. I always had an agenda. And when that wasn't present, like with her friends, she was always the first to help. And then I would hear from other parents, like, your daughter is so helpful when she comes over. I know you probably had that too. And it's like, who are you talking about? My kid? So if you have this vision of your child never doing anything or always being a certain way, just start looking around. Find out, how are they when they're with others? How are they at school? How are they in their friend group? They have both sides. We all do. And yet in the dynamic, the parent-child dynamic, often it can get one-sided. But if you're saying all or nothing or always and never, ask yourself, where am I pushing or pulling or forcing, or where do I have one-sidedness? I always do everything and they never help out. You want to look at that. And it's really hard to look at that often because we have this idea that our children are supposed to help us, right? They're supposed to jump in. She's like, thank you, Mother, for asking me to take the recycle out. I don't know how or why I had this image that my daughter was just going to be so grateful to help out, to do things around the house. I was so shocked the first time that she resisted, right? It's like, what do you mean? Here I am giving you anything, doing everything for you, and you're not gonna just take the recycle out or unload the dishwasher? What? Right? So I got fixated. I imagine you get fixated. So just play with it this week. If you notice it, if you're just thinking all or nothing black or white thoughts, it's not actually the truth of what's happening. And just see if you're willing to look a little bit wider, a little bit deeper, and see if you're willing to see all sides of yourself and your children. So Thank you for joining me for Parenting Pause this week, and I will see you next week.